Where should we be looking to go after Brexit, however it happens, hard, soft, whatever it is? After it happens, what should we be looking for in the United States in terms of our trading relations with your country?
The point I always make on this is that the UK has no more important trading partner in the world than the US. In terms of single countries, you're our biggest single export market. We're the biggest investors in each other's countries. So we're starting with a highly integrated relationship, but we should be ambitious on both sides. We should be looking forward. We should be thinking about where we're going to find the sectors that are going to create jobs and growth for both our economies in the years and decades to come. And I think we should be looking at financial services, life sciences, advanced manufacturing, all of the things that are going to take us forward. We should also, and I think our ministers have said this to each other periodically, we should also be thinking about the global system that we want to create that creates frameworks and rules and norms that suit both of our economies. That, I think, is the agenda that we have been mapping out over the last couple of years. That is the agenda that we should focus on delivering in the context of Brexit, including through an FTA, but not limited to that. And that's how I think we should set it all out.
Now, it's premature to start negotiating an actual deal, as I understand it. Until the UK is formally outside of the European Union, you're not free to negotiate a deal. But certainly you talk with people and people talk with you about what's coming up. One of the things we heard out of Capitol Hill early on, 2 or 3 weeks ago, was, let's start with agriculture, which struck me as an interesting place to start because the UK has a history with agriculture.
I think what's happening on both sides is we're both setting out our negotiating positions. The US is a little bit ahead of us. They've published their draft negotiating mandate as part of the congressional sort of scrutiny process under TPA. On the UK side, we have completed our consultation, and we will at some point soon, I'm sure, set out our negotiating positions. We will then both have our negotiating positions. We will then be able to start negotiating once we're out of the EU, and once the US has their approval from Congress to begin. I have always felt that agriculture will be part of those negotiations. It's an important political and economic priority for the US in all of their trade negotiations. We also have some agricultural interests of our own. I don't think we should allow it to be boiled down into a very sort of narrow agenda about some of the traditional agricultural topics. If I can go back to what I said a second ago, I think this is where we need to bring business communities on both sides into the debate. One thing that we will be doing here in New York in a few weeks' time is an event called Designing Our Future, which is precisely about setting out that forward agenda, which we will then, as I say, deliver through an FTA, but also in other means.
So let's talk about that future, as it were. Where do you see the greatest opportunity? What sectors do you see the greatest opportunities in a new trading relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States? Where's there an upside?
I think if you look at the world that we live in, and this of course is what Bloomberg covers day in, day out, this is a highly dynamic global economy. There's lots of challenges, there are also opportunities. The UK and the US, I would say, are two of the most innovative, services-oriented, forward-looking economies. We need to be open, we need to be engaged with the rest of the global trading system. I mentioned a second ago financial services and life sciences, but I think actually the area where we should really be focusing is the ongoing tech revolution. What is tech doing to existing sectors, including, for example, agriculture? I think there is a hugely exciting agri-tech discussion for us to have with each other about sort of the forward-facing opportunities for our farming sectors. But then also artificial intelligence, the use of data, digital trade. These are all new sectors. There aren't rules for these sectors. They don't tend to feature in FTAs, which is why we shouldn't limit our ambitions just to what has been done in the past.
When the referendum was up for vote, one of the arguments I understand was made for people who were in favor of Brexit was we're being held back to some extent by the European Union in its trade agreement. We can do something new and innovative and forward-looking as a practical matter. Implicitly, was the EU holding us back in things like AI, artificial intelligence, and some of the tech sectors? What are the creative things we could do?
I think there were many motivations behind the way people voted in the referendum. But as we have defined our negotiating position, and as the government since June 2016 has defined its ambitions for Britain in the world, securing an independent trade policy that allows us to do deals with our existing and new partners, do deals with the emerging economies of the world, has become an absolute priority. On artificial intelligence, one thing that we in the UK have been doing is thinking very hard about, what are the challenges that will emerge in AI? What are the issues around ethics and the use of these technologies? We've invested a lot in that through our industrial strategy, through something we call an artificial intelligence sector deal. We've set up something called the Centre for Data Ethics. These are all designed to sort of understand the questions that we're going to need to address, and then we can take that into our bilateral partnerships with the US, with our business communities. We can also take it into the fora where the UK and US work side by side, whether it's the G7, G20, the IMF, the OECD. And it all comes back, in my view, to that sense of what's the world that we want to live in, what's the world we want to create, and where are we going to create opportunity for our citizens going forward.
One of the places you've spent time is in Asia. And particularly, let's talk about Singapore, because some people say maybe Singapore can be something of a model in some ways for the UK. From what you know about Singapore, what could the UK take from the Singapore experience that could be applied?
The thing I was always most impressed by dealing with the Singaporean government and with the Singaporean business community is that sense of forward focus, that sense of needing to understand not only the world that we live in now, but how to create the world that we want to live in the future. That sense of horizon scanning, and then the sort of strategic partnership built between the public sector, the private sector, and the research institutions. And actually, I think that runs through the heart of our industrial strategy. And as I say, this event we'll do in New York in a couple of weeks is all about those themes, all about that partnership with business, about creating future prosperity.
Hard Brexit is much talked about, worried about, certainly on this side of the Atlantic. And I'm not exactly sure what that means, but just sort of crashing out without an agreement. We have a prominent legislator, actually, who just spoke out on this subject and warned about that possibility and planning for it. Listen to what he had to say. I'm curious if we are planning for that possibility.
With London and New York being the biggest drivers in the financial markets globally, we want to make sure that connectivity is ready to go if there's a hard Brexit. We want that assurance.
So is there a risk in this? If in fact there were a Brexit without an agreement, I'm not saying you're predicting that, but if it were to happen, would there be a risk for things like connectivity in financial services?
Since over the last few months, the UK government has been very open that we are not planning for a no-deal Brexit. It's not what we want, and it's still not what the Prime Minister is aiming to deliver through. She is determined to reach an agreement with the EU, as we're seeing play out. But we have always known that we had to be prudent in terms of planning for all eventualities, including a no-deal Brexit. We focused a lot of effort on rolling over existing agreements that we have with the US, whether in aviation, civil nuclear energy. We did something called the Covered Agreement on Reinsurance, and we're also looking at those broader connectivities across all of the key sectors of our economy. So it's not what we are, it's not what we want, it's not what we intend, but we are planning for all circumstances.
As Consul General here, and with your trade responsibilities quite specifically, as you talk to American businesses, what is the #1 thing they would like out of an agreement with the UK going forward?
I think what businesses all around the world tell governments all the time is that what they want is certainty. They want to know what are the criteria they should be planning against. And that's what we have been aiming to deliver through not only the withdrawal agreement, but the implementation period and the ability to provide for that time after we leave in order to reach forward to the future partnership, give business time to plan. The other thing that we hear a lot from businesses here is concern about the border in Ireland. And obviously over the last week, a lot of events that many of my colleagues were at around St. Patrick's Day celebrations, we talked a lot about that. And this is where I think we come back to this fundamental set of objectives, in my view, that are shared between the UK and US. We want the ability to look forward in terms of our future partnership. We want to minimise the disruption to the enormous US investment already in the UK, and we want to protect the progress made in the Good Friday Agreement and the Northern Ireland peace process. And that's what the Prime Minister is still determined to try and deliver.